There is an inherent pathological greed that runs deep in the workings of society. This is not the product of evolution. This is a product of a psychology bent on cutting corners and bending the system's principles for toxic self-interest. This is where communism comes in with its many principles of changing the hands of power from a free reign, big fish eat the little ones, to something which institutes the intention of aiding all people equally. I think there is a fine line to be played on here, whereby there is actually good to be found in both inherent selfishness and inherent selflessness. Sounds odd, I know, but I think there's a lot of writing already about how incentivizing competition can help us create better products, but then they don't take the logic to its conclusion in these ideas of competition, because we are not working in an economy that is as simple as it used to be back in the heydays of laissez-faire capitalism. The economists of the past did not anticipate the advents of things such as superstores and the ease with which a corporation can become a global force. They didn't anticipate the power of brand recognition, which makes it so that people who are already familiar with the brand will always choose that over any new competing product. And it's obviously much harder to start a company that actually has the capacity to generate competition on the world market today. Ideally, market competition makes it so that the best product rises to the top, and prices are controlled by competition with other products. But neither of these things are actually happening anymore. It's almost as though these corporations have become governments in and of themselves, because they hold complete control over the market. So trying to separate corporations and governments is not going to fly anymore. Even if you can choose between Company A and Company B, it's not a significant departure from a monopoly. Here's a video where Steve Jobs talks about monopolies. I agree with him that there is a large gap between people just trying to make a buck and people who are really trying to innovate. But I don't think monopolies are 100% the cause of this. It's more a matter of what can be said in the ways of where new development can actually still be generated. For example, if you watch Shark Tank, you know there certainly isn't a drought of people coming up with new ideas. It's more like we have found a comfortable plateau of useful ideas, and looking for new things can actually be an exercise in redundancy. Look at the new folding screen phones. Is that really doing anyone any good? Or hell, with Shark Tank as an example again, just look at all the horrible new ideas that exist. In a way, we need to be more acceptant of monopolies, yet we also need to have more control over them as the body of people in this society. A true balance of powers. It's not a functioning society if the power is in the hands of an elite few who want to opportunistically exploit their positions for monetary gain. But again, on that video, I think the list at the end is a bit misleading. There are kinds of booms and busts in terms of technological growth periods, and Steve was alive and did, in fact, capitalize on a boom, but that definitely wasn't all his doing or even the result of companies being more or less focused on product technological development than they are now. I think it was a simple matter of Steve being in a time when a boom was taking place and seizing it to its highest capacity, which, don't get me wrong, he did a great job of doing. So good job at your job, Jobs. But you know what kind of monopolies piss me off? CVS and Walgreens, as an example. They're almost always right next to each other. This is a delusion of grand proportions if this is happening, that we think that competition always makes the market better. We need to think in terms of cooperation instead now. Whereas competition was functional in the past, cooperation will be the way of the future. Instead of being right next to each other to better steal each other's customers, CVS and Walgreens should be spaced out evenly to facilitate the greatest ease that we can actually access the two stores, which are practically identical. Overall, the two companies would benefit from this if they fairly split locations by popularity, and people would have to drive or walk less to get there. When people choose between CVS and Walgreens, They aren't actually weighing the difference between the two and choosing the better corporation and making it so that the better man wins in regards to gaining more customers. There's no evolution at work here. Mostly it's just an arbitrary choice. So I mean, why not really just make them into one unified company? And although I don't have any actual backing to this thought, I think that behind the scenes with many companies, the delegation of avoiding monopolies is merely an arbitrary one that doesn't amount to anything in the modern world. The top corporations, let's say Target versus Walmart for example, are probably very much associating with each other behind the scenes to optimize profit for both sides. And there's nothing we can do as a people to stop this from occurring. Not even the government can stop that, really. We came up with anti-monopoly legislation to prevent monopolies from having too much power, but can anyone really say in confidence that this is working? A demi-monopoly may just be as bad as a monopoly under a different label, so the legislation has become mostly obsolete. And ironically, I think that having monopolies is not exactly a bad thing as long as it is something that is facilitated by the people and for the people. Like, Facebook and Google are obviously monopolies, but I don't see anything wrong with this particular instance. They provide services to as wide of an audience as possible without any major competition or competitors, and are actually better services because of it. I think there are a lot of advantages to having large corporations owning the market, which is obviously self-evident by the functionality of the systems in place currently. I mean, conceptually, there's nothing wrong with having Walmarts in every town. Yes, it kills the potential for ma and pop stores to exist, but I don't think that's an issue that affects the reality of pure distribution of goods and services. It's just a different set of people making the money. The only problem comes when there is a distance between the power of these corporations and the ability of the people, and by extension human decency, to moderate and control things that do not necessarily control themselves in a capitalistic society, which is where small businesses get a good reputation. This doesn't have to be the case, though. This again starts to go into Marxism and the good old "workers of the world, unite, you have nothing to lose but your shackles" mantra. There is a very basic principle here that I want to outline, and that's that when a person creates a corporation, they have complete control of that corporation. There is such a discrepancy of understanding between the level of the lower worker and the higher powers in that corporation that it can be completely alienating. You feel like an ant in this great machine, and this distancing enables the higher powers to do almost anything they want. The machine is already in motion, being driven by the forces of commodities and supply and demand. The market stops for no man, and yet, with all the success a company can have, this success does not trickle down. It's not meant to. It's just meant to benefit those who are in control. This is an essential flaw in the system we're working in. The market is so much larger today, yet can still be so dominated by any individual CEO. This creates a scenario whereby billionaires, something that in my opinion should not even exist, have a vicious cycle of wealth that is beyond what any human should be capable of. I do start thinking, though, if we change it so that wealth isn't just soaked up to profit the higher-ups, where is the wealth to be distributed? You may think to redistribute it evenly among the people, but I think as things currently stand, people don't necessarily need more things. I've seen the ways people spend their money, and it makes me start to question why they complain so much about taxes and not being paid enough. I know a lot of people struggle to get by, but you all want to have larger houses? More stupid possessions? No, that doesn't sit right with me. I mean, obviously people shouldn't have to live in economic hardship, but to the degree that they are materialistic, I bear no sympathy for them. What I think should happen is that the companies should be taxed and the money should be put into things that actually matter, like healthcare for all. Beyond that, I think we should institute something similar to UBI called negative income tax, where people who make under $30,000 a year, for example, are paid half the amount between their income and the 30K mark. So, for example, if you make 15K, you receive 7.5K in negative income tax from the government. And even if you make $0, then you will receive 15K a year. This works because it provides for basic needs without getting in the way of incentivizing work. This program, while expensive, would bear the brunt of a huge amount of economic burdens that exist on people in poverty in society today. And there have been many studies showing that such a program to be effectual. But that isn't really the point here. The point is that this money can and should be allocated differently. No person other than the president, maybe, needs a private jet. It's only the sensible thing to do to institute taxes when we have corporations with so much power, because there's nothing inherent to any person that makes them deserve total power and importance when it comes to whatever their product or service is. Like, there's nothing special about you. Get over yourself, even if you are a CEO. You should just be another cog in the machine of making sure that the good or service can continue to be supplied in an efficient and optimal fashion. There's nothing special about you. But then people say, oh no, you have entered the realm of Marxist dogma. That is a no-no, and it will never fly in our capitalist society of freedom and perfection. Well, no. Shut up. Just think about what I'm saying. I came up with these ideas on my own, not from reading Marx. And okay, look, I recognize that the system you're describing with its competition and private ownership and whatever else puts the rootin' to your tootin' made sense before, but in a global marketplace where few companies almost exclusively dominate everything, this is no longer sensible behavior. When it comes to Marxism, I get where this opposition comes from. I think that people who support it in today's climate are overly idealist. Pure Marxism cannot be instituted in today's world, and Jordan Peterson makes a very strong case against it that I would basically agree with. I don't feel like he would disagree with the things that I'm suggesting, though, because most of what he says about Marxism is an attack on what it has resulted in the real world. I highly recommend this video, which I will link on Marxist thought, featuring Richard Wolff, the basic ideas of which are highly censored in culture today. But I'm not an expert on Marxism, in all honesty. I'm just going off of what I can ascertain from everything I've heard other people say about it. And what I'm starting to understand is that power is the universally corrupting force. And since communism gives the government so much power, it just extends the reach of humanity's tendency towards darkness. But you know what pisses me off? People who think that socialism can't work in concept just because it has historically failed, and use countries like Venezuela as an example. If you really think that, again, I want to stress how important the video I linked with Richard Wolff is. Whatever you think about socialism, this idea is terrible logic. Like, you can't tell me if Venezuela switched to capitalism, it would be like, bam, 180 degrees around, insta-fix the economy. I don't know if I would call myself a full-blown socialist. Like, for example, I don't support Bernie Sanders' idea of free college. I mean, college is unreasonable in its current state, but so is asking for it to be free. Still, certain concepts from socialism could be extremely useful, and have been extremely useful to us as the country has developed, especially when it comes to addressing inequality. Like, okay, let me talk about myself a little bit. I have a very simple mind. I'm never going to be as book smart as someone like Jordan Peterson. But what I can do is consolidate principles that I think are useful in order to concentrate the best parts of different ideas and generate a strong lead for perhaps the best way that we could move forward collectively. Concepts excite me, and while I appreciate the wisdom generated by the past, I tend to disagree a lot of what is said in favor of what I can imagine to be instituted effectively and tangibly to reformat reality based on what is and isn't currently working for us. Perhaps I'm a little bit at fault for thinking in pure ideology rather than real-world application, but that shouldn't prevent me from at least thinking out loud. While most people think within the bounds of current and past systems, I try to be more of a futurist and think about our collective potential going forward, because I want to help change our mindset into what it needs to be to evolve. So while we can definitely refine things for the betterment of our current system, I think that a lot of our potential for the future would already be available to us already if we were to begin assessing everything that is already available in different ways. And I think that we should halt progress on certain technologies like quantum computers so long as it is superficial, because it distracts us from grassroots change, horizontal instead of vertical development. There's a continual technological arms race that isn't doing anyone any good to be harder, better, faster, stronger, and that is not helpful anymore. I don't want to have faster internet. We don't need to be in a constant state of inventing new technologies just because it's been the trend for the past century. In fact, going back to this old video, you know what would be really nice? Electronic products that don't break every other year. Of course, that is bad for our system of capitalism, so it's a pipe dream. But, I mean, beyond AI advancement, I don't think there is really going to be too much new technology that changes the world, so instead we should be focusing on more systemic improvements. The most important system change I outlined in this video, which I will link, where unemployment is a sign of progress, which can hopefully lead to better different types of jobs, less hours in the work week, and even principles like UBI instead of something that we use as a marker of stress on the economy. Wouldn't it be even greater to only have to work 5-10 hours a week than to have, say, a faster computer? Not to mention how much more raw creative power we would have available for us for things just like inventing. Imagine if childlike passion was never stifled by the need to survive in a society, that people could pursue art for the joy of making it rather than a need to conform and make bank. Similarly, think of all the stupid, useless things people have to do to gain money, or how selling out makes some bands, for example, lose what makes them unique. Or think of all the people who have great ideas but can't see them through because they can't get recognized. For example, like a really good movie script, but it can't be made because Hollywood doesn't approve of or notice it. Or someone who could be a genius artist but can't because they have to pay the bills. It's a cliché of the starving artist. All of these things are perpetuated by greed, but no one wants to talk about real solutions to them. No one wants to upset the natural order of things because there are just too many vested interests in the world. And let me give you a little perspective about how those vested interests operate. I want you to watch this video about a little game called Cookie Clicker. If you watch it, when the point of the video is unveiled, it hits you like a truck. This is the true nature of money. And we can really go deep with this too. Greed has its tendrils deep and perverts the nature of almost every institution in our entire society. All these facets of existence we've come to know and love are mere excuses for someone to take your money. Nothing is too sacred, not even religion itself. And you may look at all the silly things like wizard towers in the game and say, oh, this is just some funny game someone made up. Money is just something which facilitates trade in a healthy economy. There's nothing fundamentally evil about it. And that would be what I call a rational response. But the depths of darkness of human greed are not rational. In fact, let's go back to religion for a sec. You think throughout the world there are so-and-so great national superpowers with their leaders, various corporations and company presidents, etc. But are these the real pedestals society stands on? I want to theorize that's not entirely true. If you consider all the human motivations, I think religion in its various forms can act as the strongest, with people putting their entire faith of being into concepts they cannot with their own eyes ever see to be guaranteed as truth. Money and power are not enough for the truly power-hungry. They need an immortalized soul. See, here's the crazy thing about highly selfish people. They need to rationalize what they're doing, and the doing of that can be a complicated mess of ideological roller coasters. There is some kind of a belief system out of the public eye that justifies the madness that exists in society today, because it is, really, pure madness when you break it down to the basics outside of all the legal tomfoolery. It's funny I use that word, legal. In fact, I think that is what I would call this religion, legalism. Lots of people worship this religion unknowing that it is even a belief system that is just as valuable as any other. They go on about their day, knowing full well that all amounts of untold suffering are going on, and say, "Oh, that's fine. It's all part of the system which is working its best to ensure fairness." But it's not trying to enforce fairness at all. It's just trying to enforce our general sense of stability, and the truth is this stability only exists to make us complicit to the unfathomable greed that exists all around us, every waking moment of the day. Cash rules everything around me. And we see this, and in the back of our mind we say, "That's okay. No one is breaking the law. Sure, we can euthanize animals in shelters. It's legal. Sure, we can let companies exploit cheap labor in other countries. It's legal. Gambling is okay in Vegas. Over there, it's legal. It's okay if lobbyists bribe Congress. It's legal. It's okay if big companies temporarily shift prices to drive smaller ones out of business because they can no longer make ends meet. It's legal. It's okay for bags of chips to be half air on the inside. That's legal. Or how about the entire stock market? It's perfectly legal, so I guess people can just go ahead and make a living off of... What is it that stockbrokers do for the economy again? Ah, who cares what they're doing? It's legal too, so it's probably A-okay. See, this religion basically says at its core, anyone who is stupid enough to fall for my nefarious schemes is just a part of the natural order. I'm the predator, they're my prey. Evolution may prevail over my line of business eventually, but until then, I have a kind of responsibility to get what I can while the getting is good. This is all part of the cycle, and I'm not evil. No, I'm just the alpha, and the world needs alphas and omegas alike. Others must fail so I can succeed, and that's the way it has always been and always will be, because at the end of the day, everything is just a flow, a great give and take, and it cannot fail because the stronger will get stronger and the weak will get weaker. That's what we need to develop true strength as a species. Greed is good because greed is God. Well, in response to that, I want to quote the song Rafflecopter by band OTT. Goes, lie, cheat, deceive, connive, buy now, pay later, consolidate your loans, take more, give less, drive big, eat all you can, survival of the fattest, shock and awe, regime change, do as I say, not as I do, eye for an eye, free money if you fall over, sue the company, diminished responsibility, everything is acceptable, as long as house prices don't crash. Do you see it now? Everywhere you look, this belief permeates. Legalism is a religion that designates the powerful as a chosen holy few. It is Darwinism at its finest. Their existence is sanctified by the undeniability of their existence, that they hold their godlike power while we allow them to and accept them in their godlike status, just as law has been designated as an undeniable force of what should and shouldn't exist. They, legalists, believe that the ultimate truth of all truths is that everyone is just as selfish as they are, and would do just the same if we were in their positions of power, much like the argument the Onceler makes in The Lorax, and that we all deserve our positions of subservience on account of our inability to figure out the true nature of their game. You think authoritarianism is dead? Think again. The real force of legalism isn't visible to the common folk. Reality itself is a veneer for more powerful forces than governments and companies. The people with real power spend billions or even trillions to hide the fact of their existence, because they know if people found out they existed, there would be rioting in the streets the next day. Think about it this way. The deep web exists. Do you even have an inkling of an idea how much power it holds? Probably not, because it's so perfectly hidden as to be invisible to the untrained mind. Simple fact, you can hire a hitman on the deep web for around $20,000. You think that there aren't hidden power struggles going on based on that knowledge alone? Think about it a little further. If you really want to be powerful, you need to play the game Tribal Wars. Ever heard of it? Great game, really. There's no real objective except not to die, i.e. lose all of your property. So again, think of hitmen. What about people who paid to have bodyguards protect them from hitmen, or perhaps even a network of hitmen who are in their pocket to instead kill the person who hires them if said person attempts to hire said hitman to kill them, as a form of defense? That makes the individual untouchable. Then you can have hackers who you pay to identify potential threats that may come up from hitmen who are either on someone else's side or unidentified to the individual. All these networks of people form a tribe, with the individual supplying the pay to all members being the tribe leader. Of course, there are potentials for double agents to exist, alliances and non-aggression pacts to be formed between differing tribes, people on any side of a war to be bought out by the other side at any time, and so on and so on and so on. It's really mind-boggling in complexity, and there are people who are really good at managing all these factors to keep themselves alive in an ever-growing game of staying alive and acquiring as much currency as possible without being made subjugated to the ambition of another party. And the more money or power any individual accumulates, the more of a target they become. It's easy enough to imagine, really. You can learn a lot about game theory with the game Tribal Wars, and I think it's the most accurate picture of how power really works in reality that I know of. At some point in the game, currency even becomes obsolete, and you trade power in real time in accordance with things like how skilled your tribe is, and how fast you can encrypt and decrypt things, and how much overarching loyalty and deception you can weave, a bit like the game Survivor. The mad thing is that every player knows that any other player could turn around and stab them in the back for a certain amount of money or power. So the real game is the metagame going on in everyone's head of that little voice that says, how deep are you willing to go? How much will you risk to aspire to the highest of your potential? Who will you betray to secure your dream? What sins will you commit to avoid your sins be seen? This can go even deeper. The depth becomes more apparent when you start to think of facial recognition done to imitate people with power. Perhaps someone tries to steal Jeff Bezos' identity, or even if they succeed but someone catches them, so long as that person who catches them is willing to strike a deal, hint they are, they can become a part of a network of power entailing Bezos' money. In this sense, money is the only true god in this concept of legalism rather than actual fairness. Every law is just a rule to play by, and rules can be broken or moved around strategically to make them essentially non-existent. Like, think about how important it is for drug dealers for drugs to be illegal. Someone could even steal the place of a president, taking the rug right out from under them using carefully calibrated techniques of imitation of all kinds on all levels. It all comes down to what one can get away with when you adhere to the ideas of legalism. Everything can be hacked in some way or another, and nowadays you can think of the deep web as like the new Wild West. Anything goes until someone collects a bounty on your head. In the end, the system of Darwinist exploitative legalism can only fail. Pure competition cannot continue its existence indefinitely. Eventually there must be a level of cooperation instilled. A level of cooperation not born out of fear or ulterior motives, but genuine desire to aspire to the values of empathy and understanding of the unique existence other people hold. I believe the advent of cooperation being recognized as superior to competition will be the next great social advent, if we can make it so. Competition gets a pretty good rap when it comes to economics, but think about the nature of competition for a second. There is nothing inherent to it that goes towards creating the most ideal states or products. It is merely implied that as a result of it the cream will rise to the top. While not entirely misguided, this idea seems to serve as a kind of surrogate for actual altruism and aiming at the highest goals. I highly recommend watching this video I link about conflict theory to understand how a greater cooperation among the people could result in greater sense of economic enlightenment, rather than competition being necessitated as a means to ensure people follow the rules. The competition within society wanes into itself. Person A competes for a high-ranking career. They fail, and their frustration causes destruction in their life or perhaps even someone else's life, necessitating people with high-ranking jobs, like lawyer or doctor, to clean up. We must trace our failures down to the root, and find not a toppling down of others for personal empire, but efficiency. Can you imagine our society as less like a serious continual event of maintenance, more like a Darwinist self-fulfilling prophecy? The same example is streaked across world politics as well. We are on the lookout for the bottom rung, a well-placed weakness, an advantageous place to hull away in the tugboat. Even so, there is a kind of senility to peace. Who can imagine a society without conflict, without this continual aberration of violence and economic grabassery? Is balance but a dream of impossibility? And if so, how can we both forgive and quit fooling ourselves to the contrary? What terms must we come to place between you and me? And if we can establish them, can we make others see that such a similar dilemma within themselves? We know that man can find greater joy in relation to another being just as individuated as himself. But if competition is absolutely necessary in the relationship, where then? We must look within to that metacognitive barrier. There's a very simple thought experiment that can demonstrate the power of cooperation and how competition corrupts our mindsets to hinder our own individual progress. Let's say there are X amounts of sets or turns, perhaps 100, and every turn the two parties involved can choose one of two options, either cooperate or compete. If both parties choose cooperate, both parties get 3 units or points. If both parties compete, both parties get only 1 point. If one party competes and one cooperates, the competing party gets 5 points, and the cooperating party gets only 1 point. This means that the most ideal situation for any individual is for the other to always cooperate and offer themselves up, trusting in the other, and for the individual to take advantage of that good nature. Of course, such a system is unsustainable. No one can just go giving their trust away forever without starting to feel a bit bitter about the whole situation. So the natural situation that occurs is, both parties wanting to ensure a good outcome, yet never knowing what the other party will do, is that there is a back and forth of creating false senses of stability, attempting to dominate the other party, or even occasional bouts of either pure cooperation or competition and refusal to cooperate out of spite. Of all the possibilities that exist, out of every single conceivable strategy, it has been found time and time again that there is absolutely no way to surpass the capability of two parties who always choose cooperation. This is the grand realization. It doesn't matter what you do or how smart you are. In the end, you have made yourself worse off by choosing to compete instead of to cooperate. Being so smart in this game can only get you so far. For this reason, it has been found that the strategy of tit for tat is the single most consistently efficient strategy. And what it is choosing to cooperate every time until the opponent chooses compete, at which point you choose to compete the next upcoming round and then resume cooperating afterwards as long as they don't compete again. It's like making a simple statement that goes, "Hey, stop that. We could be doing better. If you just stop being like that, we can both be benefiting." So it's like a meta-strategy. It always wants to imply to the other party that cooperation would be preferable. Even if the other party were to take advantage of them every time they expect them to compete following their own taking advantage, nothing is actually gained on their side. They still make an average of 3 points per round. 5 plus 1 equals 6 divided by 2, 3 points. And you have to watch the other party doing the tit-for-tat strategy suffer because of their actions. Sure, you don't actually gain anything by enabling cooperation to bloom if you are the party initiating competition in this scenario, but if you do, then both of you are happy instead of just one of you. And why wouldn't you? There's nothing to lose in this situation. So if we can reasonably assume that cooperation means an average of 300 points acquired per 100 rounds, and that any competing strategy will always yield less than that on average, we can actually logically deduce that competition is mathematically evil in this thought experiment. And really, this is more of a real phenomenon than you might imagine. Okay, now with all this in mind, let me run a basic tenet of Marxism by you, the abolishing of private property. Don't judge me purely on the basis of encouraging this particular communist idea. That's not an argument. What I'm saying is something very specific that you can judge for its own merit. It's something that I came up with my own thoughts anyway. One way we could eliminate jobs is centralization of markets, so that we can eliminate competing corporations and the need for the salesman job, and focus purely on optimizing production. Like, think of the show The Office, for example. What do these people actually provide that is necessary to the tangible world and all our various needs? It's nothing but a racketeering of competing prices. The only real jobs that would matter if we could eliminate the concept of for-profit companies is the blue-collar jobs, which, by the way, we can automate. And I understand that historically giving up power that is privatized and handing it to the government has always created problems. But when it comes to Marxism, there is a reason why these ideas have such a wide appeal. In a perfect world, they would really improve our society's state. But the problem here is corrupt individuals, especially those who wield too much power. Frankly, there are hardly any governments that have existed that have been purely for the people's best interest, which is really what they're supposed to be about. This is the real problem here, not Marxism itself, and that is why capitalism and private corporations function better. So we live in a kind of paradoxical state where many people are against capitalism for all its corruption, but are also opposed to communism. This is a confused state where in reality these people are not against communism, the potentially dangerous idea that it is, but against the complete corruption and brainwashing of the people who are led into believing we live in a wholesome society where everyone has each other's backs and the government has your best interests at heart. A lot of history has to do with the people merely keeping governments in check, while today you see a lot of covert corruption as opposed to the overt corruption of some regimes in the past, which have been able to oppress the will of the people to balance world economies. What I think we need more than anything to truly thrive and develop more utopian principles is a government which does not create distinction between the will of the people and what it chooses to enact. Our system may be able to work like that as it currently stands even, but the thing is the people who are being elected are being chosen by A. interests with large amounts of money to donate controlling which candidates we see, and B. people who are mentally enthralled by a system which is inherently based on selfishness, all while presenting itself as otherwise. So those of us who are altruistic and awake can't extend our will to the realm of politics. But we do exist, and you can see this in Bernie Sanders, for example, who's been able to generate a massive grassroots following of the working class, garnering many small donations, rather than the large super PACs we see most politicians getting. This is specifically because Sanders has taken a strong stance against corporate corruption. Sadly, a pathetic Democrat who is merely a spokesperson for higher interests has been chosen as the nominee this presidential cycle instead, and the nominee in question does not even seem to be coherent enough in his old age to be fit to be the leader of anything, let alone be commander-in-chief to the most powerful country in the world. But the political problem is that how many working-class people are really going to have to give away their hard-earned cash for this cause? It's pathetic that we should have to pay any money as a means to speak out against corrupt corporate practices. The biggest question I want to ask is, should a CEO hold unlimited power in the acquisition of profits in a world where gigantic global marketplaces exist? I think if someone is heading a company, then you should pay them based upon what they are doing for that company, not based on power structures that are by now mostly arbitrary. If you make a system which minimizes work hours, pre-decides wages based on the hard facts of the labor going into any given job, such as difficulty, training needed, pressure to succeed in it, and also decides wages in accordance with the ability of the system to produce goods, deciding the price of necessary goods based upon minimum wages, and the prices of more luxury goods based on the higher echelons of potential wages one can make, and takes any and all profits made from the system and puts them into community needs and wants, you can create a system which provides in the most effectual way possible of being fair about what everyone needs and making it so that the group is the main focus, and the secondary focus of encouraging the individual to make strides for themselves is still relevant. Unless any individual is innovating their industry, there is no reason for anyone to own the profits of that industry, because the job of a CEO just becomes a job of doing what? Making risk-based analysis? Well, that's another problem of itself. When the people control the market based on collective need instead of individual profiteering, there is no need for competition. Everything is decided based upon what is best. There's no marketing because prices are fixed, again, upon key factors which are static, with the exception of when there is innovation, such as the cost of making it and the resources going into it. Marketing will only exist to explain the difference between different products. Everything is basically approved by the people, and this can occur easily over the internet. Instead of competing to create the best product, customer feedback along with a democratic upvoting system similar to Reddit will occur online to optimize products. Of course, there will always be a variety of opinions where disagreements occur, but this is just one of many ways the internet could rearrange the economy from the hands of a profiteering few to the hands of our collective needs and wants. See how that thought experiment fits in here with cooperation? People can also become representatives if their opinions are frequently influential in other people's decision-making processes. Then these people's histories of ideas and up-down votes will be visible if they want to be a representative. If you want to tell me this is communism, then just tell me exactly one thing. Why should we pay people in accordance with what some CEO says instead of this system? Why not just pay everyone based upon their contribution? I can't think of a single reason other than pure selfish greed. Keep in mind that the famous Red Scare got its start based on the violence created by warring ideologies, and was not based on a purely rational fear of communistic principles being wrong. Again, I would not call myself a communist. All of these ideas I have to change things have originated in my own mind as a response to what I see in the world that we could be doing better. There are such simple ideas as the one in this Alan Watts video that make sense in principle, but again, we are held back by the forces of Darwinist legalism. He says it perfectly when he says that what we've got against us is not a material or mathematical block, but an intellectual block. That is the very crux of the meaning of legalism. We may know what is right, but we can't carry it out because it just can't operate in this system we currently have and have all the parts keep moving in tandem. It's like what Andrew Yang said on his Joe Rogan podcast episode, where he says the truckers who are going to be put out of work by self-automated trucks are going to protest and use their trucks to block the highways with shotguns in hand, because they work hard for their jobs and the sense of security they provide. What Darwinist legalism at its core is big fish eat the little ones. The system exists is just a game whereby winner take all and screw the rest who don't make it to the top, and that's why there are so many psychopath CEOs. They have truly sold their souls to this materialist ideology. The result of this religion is that we, the sheeple, just sit around all day while the super elite exploit the entire world and live the lives of Stanley Kubrick's Eyes Wide Shut. What do you think these practically godlike features will do when we have a self doing everything? Well, they probably see global warming, for example, and go, well, I guess we should just go the way of the Georgia Guidestones and eliminate the general populace with all their problematic desires and replace them with machine drones so that we don't have to do their dirty work. It's for the best anyway, since we'll all be dead if the ice caps melt. There are no viable political alternatives to revolution against the mega-wealthy elites when the AI revolution happens, or else there will truly be no middle class. I feel like this idea does give some validity to Marx's vision of a world without economic classes, because if no one or almost no one has to work, and machines are just doing everything for us, then who's to say there should be any elites or downtrodden poor? Every day, more and more jobs need less or even no human interaction, and AI is a relatively new technology that is making gains every year, so the sky seems to be the limit as things currently stand. Systemic change has to be embraced as something that is inevitable, even if we cannot today make every necessary advancement in AI needed to start the robot revolution of work. This is really going to be a make-or-break moment in history, if we can restructure the world or not. We should also try to restructure our thoughts on materialism, because the less we need to consume as a people of this society, the less we have to work collectively. I mean, it's really sad how obsessed with concepts of ownership people have become. What does the average person in society have that I don't have that makes them, quote-unquote, happy? Though most people do at face value claim to bear happiness, more than not do they spend their time complaining about their work life or the multitude of obligations they have. I am a minimalist. To me, minimalism speaks the truth of biology. Well, in reality, it is quite easy to meet the needs of people in such a manner. It does not happen by ordinance of the way of society. We'd much rather be stuck in a constant rat race, trying to attain something that's always more. It's a false idol, like I spoke of in this video. All people seek the same things, really. It's only that we complicate our perceptions of them, and would rather find ways to claim betterness than them in order to give our lives meaning. Illusions, to put it simply, and you can't realize it until you've passed the mental hurdle of having actually done it. By then, what? You're just an old decrepit man with nothing but a few extra rooms in the house and a decently presentable vehicle to get you nowhere in particular. You wanted to attain something and therefore lost everything. It occurred to me recently that if you suppose everything was to go according to my plans and our restructured society in perfect form, there would still be a recurrent issue that there will be bad people, and these people in their power-hungry mania will create problems, not just at the level of instances of crime, but the potential for corruption. Well, my rebuttal to this is not different to my rebuttal to the criticism of automated vehicles not being able to be made free of potential flaws, and that it doesn't have to actually be free of flaws, it just has to be better than the average human driver. So I say, if again, things go according to plan, and not only would there be less crime, because people would overall be more satisfied with their lives, but also less corruption, because there would be less room for corruption to exist. Of course, no system can be truly immune to the potential existence of threats from both inside and out, but I think the evils of human nature are not written into our genetic code as much as they are a response to our environment, like for example how racism was once prevalent but is not anymore. Also, they exist as a reaction to scarcity, which we should aim to eliminate as a primary goal. But beyond our ability to transcend to a post-scarcity economy, we also need to move to a post-materialism economy, where we favor in importance the quality of life experiences rather than collecting excessive items, as seen in Fight Club's Tyler Durden's collecting of furniture. I want to live in a society where people are free to pursue creative and intellectual goals, and are not, in the words of Todano from the show Agretsuko on Netflix, who is the designer of an AI system, bogged down by rote jobs. I think we could create a situation where, in the words of Steve Hughes, we can stop working because everything's already built, or at the very least abolish the 40-hour work week in favor of maybe a 10-15-hour work week. We could eliminate so many jobs in an idealized society. No military or technicians to build weaponry, no bankers and we all use cryptocurrency, no advertising, less people working in stores like GameStop because everything can be ordered online. Amazon has already half automated their packing processes. AI-driven cars and trucks and buses are in the near future. With my health concepts, we could eliminate a large portion of doctors because problems like cancer would be eliminated, which I explain here. I imagine we could learn to live more simple lives if we could just give up our materialistic ideals, and that alone would eliminate a large number of jobs. I've had an idea, very simple in concept, that may work in this given scenario, but try to take this more with a grain of salt and digest it conceptually than actually think about the details. So we create a compound or compounds which house people en masse. Everyone gets a decently large furnished room to themselves, or if there are a couple, a shared larger room, which comes supplied with basic entertainment amenities. A decent-sized television, gaming console, computer, though gaming consoles and computers would probably be merged into a single device by this point in time, and this computer would come packed with all the free digital entertainment available to us. Every movie, video game, and song ever made available completely for free, along with your reasonable choice of food. Perhaps even a communal shared space for recreation with things like tennis courts and a swimming pool. This makes more sense than ever as we provide for people's basic needs and wants with the advent of digital entertainment being free to distribute infinitely many times. If people wanted to further advance in society beyond these basic amenities, they could volunteer themselves for some form of work which may be necessary. I mean, lawyers, for example, perhaps will always be necessary in some form, but even a lawyer's job can be less burdensome through the use of computer AI systems, which greatly reduce the amount of time they have to spend working, while also increasing their efficacy, as seen in a Vice special report called The Future of Work. I think if we're to evolve as a culture, it is vital we shift our focus away from the material and towards the material. For more on this subject, please check out how I explain spiritual phenomena in my Spirituality is Anything You Want It to Be video. In the way I explain in this video, we can derive a sense of fulfillment and connectedness with the universe by the overcoming of challenges, and how success in these pursuits, combined with the focus of spiritual intent, can elevate our consciousness to the highest states possible. Once you embrace this idea into your own personal sense of enlightenment, you can realize that spirituality adds a necessary component to your sense of purpose in life, and we can from this end transcend materialism, which will again reduce the number of jobs we need to power society. You may even come into contact with what the band Death Grips calls the enigmatic onion, layers of interdimensional dominion. This is essentially the amalgamation of conflicted wills in the collective unconscious as it tries to manifest our shared reality. I'm a fan of the blogger Less Visible, and he speaks a lot about how people of ill intent manifest their will through perverse ritualistic magic. His perspective is somewhat true, I believe. The people are held under the dominion of forces which hope to obfuscate the collective will away from truth and love. Some of this is also done through NLP, or neuro-linguistic programming, but there is actually a deeper truth, and that is the truth of the spiritual iceberg, and how all wills are essentially contending in an unseen struggle for dominance. Spiritual warfare is a real phenomenon. It is a sign of the dark times we are living in that those who understand the true nature of such phenomena understand the egotistical nature of man, and how he seeks to elevate himself above others in any and all pursuits. Man is truly vicious when it comes to social vanity, economic superiority, and generalized power-seeking. It is the hidden darkness lurking in humanity's heart which keeps us in a state of perpetual turmoil, and to overcome it we have to realize on all levels that we are not always so different from those who oppress us in the spiritual and political fronts. The dark web is proof of this. Anyone can learn to hack and cement themselves as a powerful force in the global struggle for virtual real estate. Just like a black hat, for example. Let me quote Wikipedia real quick. Black hat hackers break into secure networks and systems with the motive of destroying, modifying, or stealing some sensitive data, or to make the networks unstable for authorized network users. End quote. So anyone in power has to be able to protect themselves against black hatters who specialize in things such as ransomware. So through this train of logic, you can see that there's actually a kind of unification between the realms of spirituality and the dark web. Anyone can wield spiritual power in the same way anyone can be a hacker. But what is spiritual power? The ability to manifest outcomes and impact people's psyches and the collective unconscious towards whatever your will is. Not to brag, but I single-handedly proved that spiritual power is a real thing by breaking the veil that obstructs differing consciousnesses from each other one time. When I did this, the social space I occupied became an open space for my deepest inner processes to manifest in other people's consciousnesses, and I even had a moment where everyone in the room was turned to me and I was asked if I wanted to die. This really happened. It was not a hallucination or even a mere synchronicity like I experienced in the one and only time I did LSD. I was even told that I would not remember a conversation that was particularly revealing, which was true, but the fact that I was directly told I was going to forget certain revelations and the central theme of the conversation was etched into my mind like scratches onto a glass surface. The very next day I was even kicked out of the home where the party took place by someone who I didn't even know and I later found out had no authority to do such a thing. Anyone in my position would have to call into question their fundamental beliefs about reality if they had my experience. No basic assumption could be trusted, so I feel like in a way I have a responsibility to explore spiritual power and its limitations and potentials. But the point I want to get across is that there are icebergs in all these different areas: the internet, the deep state and politics, the spiritual reality, And when you get to the purest state of any of them, there's a kind of coalescence into the singular form of power, and anything that manifests is merely an extension of an individual's power who has skin in the game. The spiritual changes reality around the material. The political creates constraints around the material. And through the dark web, one can extract things they want and desire from the material. But again, it's all the same thing, power. If we are to evolve as a species, we have to recognize that power in ourselves and power in others need not be diametrically opposed. To quote the band Pussifer, we will never know world peace until 3 people can simultaneously look each other straight in the eye. There's a deep truth in that, I think. We need to come to a collective understanding of where we can trust and appreciate each other without fear. Like Peter Joseph from the Zeitgeist film says, it's a choice between fear and love. So the best way we can learn to change our mindsets is to change our priorities. Learn the virtues of cooperation over competition, because otherwise we're just going to keep being destructive towards those who get in our way of our personal vanity. If we can learn to embrace peace and implement my high ideals worldwide, we can dramatically shift the world away from this dismal, game theory-esque trap we inhabit, the prison planet, as Alex Jones puts it. I'm talking about the potential for immortality here, the ability to foster ecstasy within oneself with no drawback, the recalibration of all world politics around pure, efficient happiness, a new way of approaching life practices of self-embetterment. My every waking moment is fully engrossed in the depths of the truth of what I am trying to pedal to, from the voices to the inner bliss to the dreams that hint at a potential lying dormant within me to manifest reality into what I need it to be. And what I have manifested in my waking life is a kind of self-imposed hell, where no one will believe a word I say about the utopia I envision, while they simultaneously drag me down with strange kinds of black magic and negative synchronicities. Every voice is a thought crime committed against me in anticipation of what I want to do. I'm not going to debate with you or anyone else about this reality or nature of these synchronicities. They encompass my entire reality like a balloon encompasses air. Go read the book The Synchronicity Key if you're really wanting to get into that. The psychic energies that surround me are as real as changes in the weather, so don't come to me and tell me I'm delusional. Don't tell me anecdotal evidence means nothing to you, because by doing so you are already forfeit in my eyes to the point being made here, and that is that the spiritual has real capability to change the physical, but it cannot manifest a utopia so long as man obsesses over the distractions of the temporal reality. So the rest is up to you. Do you want to keep playing a game that no one wins, rather like the scene from War Games where the only winning move is not to play? Or do you want to create a post-materialist future where you live in a Burning Man-like life where you never have to return to what they call default reality? The powers that be exist to keep us from that idealized true society, profiting off of violent wars and competition. Anyway, the last thing I'll leave you with is a video by Less Visible about the revolution. Enjoy.